Pop quiz, hotshot. Close your eyes. Now open them. Wait, no, I wasn't ready. Close them. Now open them. What's the first thing you think when you see this image? Don't be afraid to shout it out. What's the first thing you think? Here's the deal. If you said anything other than a turtle, well, then you are completely and turtly wrong, buddy. What's that? You don't see the turtle? You think I'm wrong? Why don't you check out this headline from Games Radar? The Trailblazer ship in Star Wars Outlaws drew inspiration from an unlikely place. Turtles. Checkmate. Read 'em and weep. Game over. Smoke 'em if you got 'em. It's a turtle. In that article, lead artist Samuel DeVos is quoted, "I was talking to Benedict Podlesnig, the world and art director, about what the main inspiration was for the Trailblazer, and it was actually a turtle. Seriously, look at the spaceship again. You don't see the turtle?" The author of the article, Heather Wald, goes on to state, "The turtle-like look becomes more apparent once you know the reptile shell influenced the design." Which, yeah, totally true. To be fair, more apparent might be a bit of a reach. I think remotely conceivable might be a better way to say that, because you're not going to convince me that anybody sees a turtle the first time they look at that spaceship. But I mean, once you know it's turtle-inspired, it's practically all you can see. Look again. Go on. Turtly a turtle. Turtly a turtle. No question in my mind, now that I know what to look for. Yep, that is a turtle. And after reading the article, boy, did I feel stupid for not seeing it earlier. I mean, it's right there. That's a fucking turtle. Now look, you might be saying, geez, Jeff, going a little hard in the paint. Why don't you leave the poor AAA publisher and studio alone? And yeah, you're right. I'm probably just a little salty that Massive has gone from making games involving IP I like The Division, and started making games around IP I've fallen out of love with, like Disney's Star Wars, or IP I never ever cared for, like Disney's James Cameron's Disney's Pocahontas, which I've disliked since the midnight premiere of the very first movie. I'm afraid it's becoming a bit of a trend where studios whose work I enjoy end up with projects whose source material is an IP I'm less than enthusiastic about. Like Machine Games being asked to make Indiana Jones, the world's most okayest franchise of all time. And I'm not saying Star Wars Outlaws looks bad, necessarily. I think it looks kind of cool, like an open world Uncharted, just, Star Wars-y. Then again, I found the demo of Flintlock to be good fun, and that game is not doing well. So what do I know? But regardless of how I feel about it, I do find it interesting that Ubisoft is PRing the shit out of this game and describing every mundane mechanic as if it's never been done before in the history of the video game medium. What caught my attention was an article I read that tries to sell Star Wars Outlaws by going out of its way to insult Bethesda's Starfield. It's clear Ubisoft wants this game to be a huge hit, and they will do whatever marketing they need to make that a reality, empowering Ubisoft employees to say whatever they need to say, including talking a bunch of trash about Ubisoft. In an article on GamesIndustry.biz, creative director Julian Garrity tells Christopher Dring, Outlaws is a Star Wars game, not a Ubisoft game with Star Wars layered over the top. We are hyper-conscious of the Ubisoft house style. Massive has always been different. The Division and The Division 2 were different. Originally, Massive was an independent studio, then an Activision studio, so it has always thought very differently. The DNA of Massive is quite unique from Ubisoft, but there are so many great lessons to be learned by the Ubisoft way of making games. Now, I don't necessarily agree with the Ubisoft hate, but this self-owning trash talk approach is apparently working, because as the headline of a different Dring article reads, Star Wars Outlaws remains IGN's most wishlisted game of 2024. IGN June wishlist chart. Of 2024 being key there. The article opens, the upcoming Ubisoft adventure has the second most wishlist ads on IGN playlist over the last 12 months, and is also the second most wishlisted game overall. The only game ahead of it is Grand Theft Auto 6, which is due in 2025. Which, I mean, fair, it's Grand Theft Auto 6. You know, GTA 6. The Tom Petty game from the makers of Max Payne 3, it's gonna be pretty big. But you might be wondering what IGN playlist is. I didn't know either, but I looked it up. Beat your backlog. IGN playlist gives you the power to track your backlog across your favorite platforms, rate games, get how long to beat time estimates, useful, discover what to play, and create, remix, and share playlists of games with anyone in the world. I can honestly say I've never wanted to share or create a playlist of games, much less remix it. But okay, I see why that's an important stat. Hey, we're getting off track. Try to focus. Let's get back to the Games Radar marketing preview piece on Star Wars Outlaws so that we can get to the gratuitous Starfield hate. One of my favorite parts in this series of PR-pleasing articles that I read through is when the devs asked themselves, what inspired George Lucas? Which is a really good question with a good answer given. George Lucas was greatly inspired by the Wild West and spaghetti westerns, which informed the frontier-style design of Tatooine. With this in mind, Massive decided to bring to life some new locations on the desert planet, such as the Wayfar Station, which has a lot of frontier iconography. Frontier iconography. Powerful stuff. Yes, that is a sheriff with a cowboy hat. I have this scenario in my mind of a conference room at Massive in front of maybe a whiteboard. Somebody says, okay, y'all, George Lucas was heavily inspired by Westerns. What's some good frontier iconography that we could work into the game? And somebody raised their hand and said, cowboy hat? Yes. Okay, let's expand on that. There are no bad ideas. Let's brainstorm. Who else? And who else said, an alien dressed like Woody from Toy Story? Yes, I love it. Are we writing this down? Doesn't matter. That's unforgettable. The inspiration couldn't get louder or less subtle. And now I will demonstrate how they open jars in the break room. Okay, now for the article that inspired this week's whole topic. How Star Wars Outlaws is trying to tackle one of the features I wanted in Starfield. A transition from the open world to spaceflight. Now, you may recall that people were very mad at Starfield for having loading screens. So mad that it seems it's sort of rubbed off on Massive and Ubisoft, and they are shaking in their boots that anyone would suspect that they too have loading screens, because according to them, they do not. No way. Not them. They don't have loading screens. They have landing sequences. When you fly from an orbital region in space to a planet, you'll go through clouds and still maintain control on a fixed path before a landing sequence begins. You'll maintain control on a fixed path. Oh yeah, like a dog on a leash. The developer continues, we still need to unload everything and load everything because we need the memory back. So there's a few things we can do to try and speed that up. But generally, what we also want to do is make sure that the thing you go to is loaded when you get there. So the idea of flying through the clouds and then doing a little loop while we load is a way of safely making sure that we can unload everything behind you, load everything in front of you, and not lose control as the player. Basically, this is the spaceship version of the player character inching their way down a cramped passageway that I'm sure you've seen in dozens of other games. It's a loading screen. The whole point is that the player still has control at this point. you can still move the ship around. You can't fly off in a different path, but the game doesn't take control away. It looks like a realization scene, it's actually a loading. So there's a point where Kay will start pressing buttons and she will loop if you haven't finished loading. And as soon as it's finished, then we cut. So the idea is to make sure we have a fallback for how we can cover the fact that we're loading. And look, obviously, in a perfect world, no loading screens, right? None. Zip. No loading screens. But that's not how games are built. There are limitations. Everything is a give and take. Resources are limited. And even as technology gets bigger and better, developers are just going to do more with those resources. They will always have to make a choice of how they use those finite resources. So loading screens in and of themselves really shouldn't be that big of a deal, right? But since everybody ragged on Starfield so hard for it, now we have to act like loading screens are the end of the world in every game. We can't just have loading screens out and about all willy-nilly. Are you out of your mind? But we can have landing sequences. We can literally stick our heads in the clouds and pretend this is seamless. And you know what else? Take a look at these. Do they look familiar? Do you recognize them? Have you seen them before? I really hope the answer is no, because these are my personal screenshots, and I would be rather bothered to find out you'd been spying on me. So what I like about those shots that I took in photo mode is that Starfield plugs them into the loading screens. And so I get these little reminders of where I've been in the galaxy, what I've done, what I found memorable in my 60 hours playing Starfield. And yeah, obviously no loading screens would be perfect, but to be honest, those personalized screens didn't grow stale for me in the way I imagine that a loop of fucking clouds will. I should go.